It is a time of legend. The galaxy is in flames. The Emperor's glorious vision for humanity is in ruins. His favored son, Horus, has turned from his father's light and embraces chaos. His armies, the mighty and redoubtable Space Marines, are locked in a brutal civil war. Once, these ultimate warriors fought side by side as brothers, protecting the galaxy and bringing mankind back into the Emperor's light. Now, they are divided. Some remain loyal to the Emperor, while others have sided with the War Master. Preeminent amongst them, the leaders of the thousand-strong legions are the Primarchs. Magnificent superhuman beings, they are the crowning achievement of the Emperor's genetic science. Thrust into battle against one another, victory is uncertain for either side. Worlds are burning. At Isstvan V, Horus dealt a vicious blow, and 3 loyal legions were all but destroyed. War was begun, a conflict that will engulf all mankind in its fire. Treachery and betrayal have usurped honor and nobility. Assassins lurk in every shadow. Armies are gathering. All must choose a side or die. Horus musters his armada, terror itself, the object of his wrath. Seated upon the golden throne, the Emperor waits for his wayward son to return. But his true enemy is chaos, a primordial force that seeks to enslave mankind to its capricious whims. The screams of the innocent and the pleas of the righteous resound to the cruel laughter of dark gods. Suffering and damnation await all should the Emperor fail and the war be lost. The age of knowledge and enlightenment has ended. The age of darkness has begun. Horus's armada gathers, and he has defeated all enemies sent against him, even the Emperor's executioner, Thras. One barrier remains before he can strike for terror and lay waste to the Emperor's dream. The Beta Garmon system occupies the most direct and only viable route to the Sol system and Terra. To break it, Horus assembles a war host of incredible proportions, and Titans in untold numbers. To lose here is to lose the war, and Horus has no intention of turning back. But the Imperium understands the importance of Beta Garmon too. A massive army is arrayed, comprised of near numberless army cohorts, and a mustering of Titans to challenge even the martial might of the War Master. Titans fight against Titans, as the god machines of loyalist and traitor alike go to war. This conflict will be like no other before it, a world-ending battle that will determine the next phase of the war. The flower of humanity. I was there. I was there when the legions died. The days the back of our empire was broken. Titandeath is what many would call it later. But they missed the point. All of them. They always miss the point. I stand before my mirror, holding a single perfect goblet. I assume the Thunderbolt. My body strained as it should be. My goblet extended, an attendant now performs his role. He steps forward slowly. He ever so carefully tips the container in his hand. Water pours slowly into the glass. Not slapped down into its center, causing splashing. No. He did that the first time. He regretted it. This is not the way. Now, he does it correctly. He touches the tip of the receptacle to my glass. The water pours carefully into it, filling it from the side. The water runs down its edges into the center as it fills. He draws it back a tiny fraction and slows the flow even more as it reaches filling point. The last drop flows and he draws up the reservoir in his hands. The goblet is filled to the brim. Beyond. Were I to move a single muscle in any part of my body, it would overflow. I stay in position as the chronometer ticks on the wall behind me. I am centered. I am calm. I am rigid. I am disciplined. My sinews turn to fire as the moments click past. They then take on a more dangerous element, as I almost feel my senses retract from my body. It is an attempt by my sinew to take the strain from my mind, from my decision. I snap my mind back into control. I force myself to feel every last element of strain. Only in this way can I fight and master the fatigue that is attempting to shut down my senses. If they do, I will quake. A shudder will go down my arm as it will slowly dip down under the pressure, and the water will fall from my goblet. I watch as the sun rises, its light creeping down my head and then directly into my eyes. I do not shield them. I could not with my limbs, but I do not do so with my eyelids either. I take the discomfort. I eat the distraction. I welcome it. The more challenge, the better. I stand unflinching in position, feeling every muscle, accepting their screams. Every corpuscle, every nerve is alive. The chronometer finally chimes. An hour. It is too short, but there is a war going on. I slowly stand, bringing the goblet to my mouth. I toast the morning light. Not a drop is spilt before, not one at the end. When it is empty, when I drink every last drop, I am a machine. My fuel, food, and water. I maintain my body, the shell that houses my animus, my will. Yet I yearn to return to my true form, my metal skin, my friend and enemy, my destiny and my curse, my titan, Ostium Pernices. I have met many a marine, have witnessed their wrath, their skill. I have seen their discipline. Each one is a man in a million. I have met the navigators, those who see into the warp and allow our ships to ply the galaxy. Theirs is a singular mutation. They must be hardened of spirit to resist the things they see with their third eye, the madness it induces. I have met those who command vast powers, able to bring down lightning or read minds, yet they are not proof to but one sister of silence, their dour countenance barely remembered, yet ever there to drag the powerful into powerlessness on their black ships. But all that is special about all of these beings is given to them. By heritage, mutation, lineage, or training, they are the rare, but they are as numerous as the stars in the galaxy. compared to me and mine. My father reminisced often of it. The moment he knew. The moment he said I proved it to him. He needed no other to confirm it. For I was but a child, small, scrawny, but lithe and nippy. Yet my brother was of some age above me. I could not win. I could never win. But I never once yielded. He took me, my father told me. My brother dragged me to the window. He threw them open. Then he ducked down and grabbed me. I could not resist physically, but I did mentally. I went rigid, and I glared at him, daring him. And he did it. He held me out of the window, dangled me there by my feet. I looked at him. My tiny face scrunched up, and I glared at him. Nothing more. I did not wail, I did not struggle, but I did look down. But then glared at him again, daring him to do it, saying in every way but words, "Do it. Drop me. Throw me to my death if you will. But I will not yield." My brother feigned resignation and brought me back inside. He beat me. But he wasn't striking me. He was hitting himself. He had lost. I took my thrashing. I laughed when it was done. I laughed at him. He did not return to silence me. He knew he could only do it by ending me. And he would not do that. I was his little brother, after all. He did not even pass basic examination. He went on to a glorified desk job, a ceremonial role. I made Princeps. As my father said, he knew that I would, because he did not stop the beating. He did not step in, even when my life seemed in danger, as I was dangled out of a window to a drop of some 3 miles down. He said I was always in control of the situation. I was. Will. The others have no idea what it is. They think they do, but they do not. We are will. Or at least we start as such. We Princeps. Few can maintain the rigors of control under the strain we are placed. I have witnessed Princeps become too connected to their throne, to their titan. Some have even submerged themselves in amniotic tanks to be perpetually with their partner, their titan. But this can lead to the death of character, the absorption of consciousness into the whirlwind, into the titan itself. I lost my mentor to this. It was not so long ago, and I still miss his barked commands into line. Of course, mine are cool and calm, always. He became aloof, dispassionate, centered only on the enemy, ignoring all but the fire of battle. And we knew. We could see him devolve every day, becoming as hard as a metallic frame he thought was his own. It did not go well, and eventually, he was not supported one day. I made sure of it, for if he had returned to our lines in the state he was in, we would have lost more than his titan. We would have lost some of those who tried to take him down. So I let the enemy have him, the scum. I withdrew when I should have advanced to support him. I miss him, and I miss his titan in the line. But it was reclaimed. Perhaps it will fight again. None questioned me, not about that day, that decision. nor any subsequently. It needed to be done. He had become the machine, an honor to some, but he was not able to lead, not able to take orders. So in this war, against our opposite numbers, against our own kind, it could not be tolerated. Their Princeps seemed to be devolving during this war. When we stand in our lines, we are silent, we are still, we are will. They are a collection of monsters, fidgeting, shuffling, swaying, and bucking, prepared to charge, ready to fight. The Titans seem to be in charge across the battlefield, not the traitor Princeps. It is getting worse. This gives us some advantage, but their ferocity, illogical and oft suicidal, counters it. We are fighting a never-ending war against our own. It pains us. Every Princeps here will die before they bend the knee, but it is painful. Our own Titans dislike it, or like it too much. They were never meant to fight one another. They were forged in the depths of time, in the Dark Age, but they were made to defend, to protect, to prosecute wars against the enemies of humanity. They were never designed to destroy one another. And this mad war is making even our Titans lose their sanity. What little of it they have. Their urges are more powerful than before, more bloodthirsty. By fighting the corrupted, our very own are becoming monsters. Thus, they fight against each of us Princeps more than ever before. We make our lines again. Lines that none of us would have thought would ever happen. For there are so many of us. The Primarch Dawn drew the line. He said we would retreat no further. And after years of combat, as warp storms shrouded the system, we were trapped in here with the traitors. Yet now they have stilled. The warp is silent again, and more ships have come through. Reinforcements for us. Millions upon millions of the Imperial army. Scores of Titan Legios are here. Multiple legions of Astartes. We stand. Yet we knew that the War Master would come. He would appear soon, bringing all the force of his armies to bear on this one point, this one system. For if we fail here, if we do not stop the traitors, then they will strike directly into the Sol system, the footstep to Holy Terra, and the Emperor himself. We must stop them. We must stop them here. Thus are we stood in our hundreds, lines of Titans many miles across. And away from us, across the field, the forces of Horus walk. The Titan Legios march towards us. And there will be no quarter asked nor given, for this is Beta Garman, and we must not fail. We cannot. I look up. Is this the end? The skies are burning. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and features of the 30K universe and the Horus Heresy, where the age of knowledge and enlightenment has ended, and the age of darkness has begun. All thanks to our friends over at Horus Heresy Legions, the excellent mobile game that you can experience for yourself via the links in the description. But before you go, do be a lamb and give me your ears. I have a tale that may just whet your palate for the adventures to come in the game. For today, we are to take an introductory look at some of the most important weapons that have ever seen action in the entire setting, and the reason that they are now mostly a thing of the past. Mostly. They are the mighty. They are the god machines of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Titanicus. They are the Collegia Titanica, the Titans. For when one talks of the Imperium, I should really talk of the twin eagle, the duality that is the Imperium of mankind and its Mechanicus allies. For they are not quite the same thing, yet interlocked and symbiotic, one would not thrive without the other, no matter what they may extol to their lessers. They know. For together they are strong, but never as strong as they once were. For much is made of the impact of the Horus Heresy on the numbers and grandeur of the Astartes. It destroyed them. But the conflict took its toll across near every spectrum of the entire empire, and all of its constituent parts. The Mechanicum fractured, its leading lights mostly going over to Horus, who offered to free them of the constraints placed upon them by the Emperor. Those who remained loyal were later to become the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Titans are the god engines of the Mechanicus. They are its ultimate expression of power, some say. Many believe it is the weapons of exterminatus that are the pinnacle, but they are wrong. Because destroying is easy, so easy. But it takes will to create. Will and vision, discipline, skill, knowledge and resources. Time not being the least of them. Creation is an act akin to godhood. And when they faced one another over the fields of battle, there was no less bitterness and contempt as with the Astartes themselves. There is no war as brutal or savage as a civil war, some say, and this was utterly true of the heresy. Beings of supposed logic despised one another. The Forge Worlds had simmering resentments and rivalries. Perhaps it was the taint of chaos that whipped all up in the Age of Darkness. Perhaps the level of hate had ever been there, just denied an outlet. But the carnage was to prove beyond anything anyone could have imagined. For during the major engagements of the heresy, the camera lens is so oft held on the Primarchs and their sons. The battle of brother against brother. But in each event, be it the Dropside Massacre or the ultimate siege of the Palace on Terra, the Titanicus were ever present, unleashing hell on the behalf of one side or the other. But really, they were hell-bent on deciding the matter of their own wars, their own battles. Horus just gave them the excuse. For during the Great Crusade, it was often Mechanicum forces that were used to bring Forge Worlds into compliance. It was they who directed the attacks, assisting the Crusade fleets where and when to strike for greatest effect. And those Forge Worlds that held out against the inevitable, those who fought the Crusader expeditionary forces for their autonomy, those who resisted absorption and Imperial compliance, they always failed. But they never forgot. Never. They never forgave those they saw as betraying them to the armies of the Emperor, and they brought all of those grievances to bear, and the flag of rebellion was raised. Sides being chosen not out of pure logic, details or collated numbers, but by who had already gone over, and their relationship with the next Forge World in the path of the War Master and his grind toward the Sol system, unholy terror. His doomed duel against his father abroad the bridge of the vengeful spirit. Many did not wish to bow to Mars any more than the Emperor's rule, so it was never simple, never easy, never predictable, never logical, not really. It had only been a few hundred years, or even less, since their humbling. In the grand scheme of these Forge Worlds, it was barely the blink of an eye. The resentment were fresh, the resultant hatred very real. And the calamity at Beta Garman was a blow from which the Collegia Titanica would never truly recover. Their strength utterly shattered, as much, if not even more so, than the legions of Astartes. For it is difficult to make new Marines costly in the extreme. To make new Titans requires the will and graft of entire swathes of humanity, its production of all else reduced to facilitate their march. A cost the Imperium can no longer sustain in enough depth to do anything more than merely replace what is now in action. The attrition rate is never acceptable, no matter how light compared to other wings of the armies of humanity. For again I said, humanity has an almost inexhaustible supply of flesh to throw at their foes. Armies beyond count. But not Titans. Not they. But I feel I am getting ahead of myself, quite considerably, for I have not asked the most pertinent of all questions. Who are the Collegia Titanica? And what is a Titan? Ah, gentle listener, we must use the most important muscle in our body to brook this subject, for I can only do so much with the word. You must use that imagination, that impressive brain of yours, to make my words come to life. For only through experiencing them, feeling them, hearing them, smelling them, can one fully understand what they are and the impact that they have. They are the god engines of war. They are the most advanced vehicles of wrath the human race employs, and they are death incarnate. Entire worlds can be flattened, entire continents glassed, systems smashed and armies burnt to crisps in seconds by these creations of Mars. But not just of the Mechanicum, but Mars, the old god of war. For that is their only purpose, their only conceivable use. The Orders of Knights could well have been as much construction vehicles as marshals, some say. The ships of the line can be refitted to carry refugees or resources. Their use is manifest. Anything and everything the Imperium creates can have multiple uses. If the swords of the setting were suddenly to be turned to plowshares, even the redoubtable Space Marines. For many a Primarch considered their use when the Crusade was finally wrought and the realm was secure for all time. What would they do? They were answering that question. There was potential. But the Collegia Titanica is not like this. It cannot be. It is a body that is devoted to only war. It can never change, never be pacified, without its dismantling. For the secret is that the men and women of the Collegia would not be able to tell their wards that they will never be ridden again, will never face the fires of battle again. For the Collegia Titanica is the institution that finds, trains and fields the Princeps and their moderati. They, the few, the rarest of all humans in the entire galaxy. They alone can master and then command the god engines of war, the Titans. Each is of an almost inconceivable size, mind-wrenching to even witness their procession, let alone face their wrath. For they are armed with weapon systems that would be more at home on most capital ships of the line in any other setting. Their protections are the same as those of naval ships as well, and only the most rare concentrations of fire can even scratch their defenses, for they have void shielding. The field that is created out of the warp itself, a barrier of insanity and improbability between the Titan and the energy sent to destroy it, shielding from the dark age of technology, when near anything was possible. They have sets of these shields, that they alternate and raise and lower in groups to maintain harmony in their engines, trying not to drain the Titan in any protracted fray. Like a blat of armor, one shield or more can be pierced, only for there to be more layers to the onion behind, and when those inner layers are finally overwhelmed, then it is very likely that the original outer shields are back again. Even so, each Titan is created of rare materials with arcane technologies that even the Mechanicus now barely understands, if it does at all. Armor feet thick that can absorb energy and heat or deflect the most powerful ballistic assaults. They stand many tens of meters tall, each one a megalith of metallic fury. Titans were only made for war, which is rare if anything hailing from the dark age of technology, as the Imperium calls it, but in reality, It was the zenith of our species' power. Yet even then, the galaxy was a dark place with threats from all around. The human navy of that time was akin to godlike, compared to the power they now possess. But numbers count, and the Imperium creates as much as it can, as swiftly as it can. The reality is that it is probably as costly to create a Titan as it is a small escort, or even a light cruiser. Yet they are needed in the armies of humanity. They are desperately needed. For humanity is not the only race that feels these beasts of carnage, these gods of war. The Elder Titans are lithe and nimble, but can melt even Baneblades and strip Void Shields with their advanced laser weapons. The Orcs merely need to gain population before they hit a critical mass, and then, to the shock of everyone, out of junk and ore alone, they will generate their own crude and unlovely, but no less lethal, Titans. The Tyranids have their own mega-beasts, their Hierophants, their own Bio-Titans. Often the size of hab blocks, only the weaponry of our own Titans can even pierce their skin, let alone bring them down. Only they. But those are concerns for the grim darkness of the far future. Let us ground ourselves again in the period in question, the Age of Darkness, the time of the Horus Heresy. The Emperor had claimed Earth, unified it under his sole rule. He then made a pact with the Lords of Mars, the Mechanicum as they were known, were the holders of the most advanced technology, and had maintained wonders now lost to most across the galaxy. They had been an empire unto themselves, and long in their reign. For the warp storms of the Age of Strife had brief gaps, moments of calm, and in those brief years of respite, the Forge Worlds of Mars sent out huge colonization fleets into the darkness. They would take the word of the Omnissiah, the ways of the Mechanicus, out into the stars. And when they reached a world with mineral deposits enough, the right blend of requirements, they would land and settle. They would create new Forge Worlds, and each would have their own legion, a legion of Titans. When the warp calmed and the Emperor finally made his way out into the universe at the head of his great crusade, the Mechanicum went with him. They provided weaponry, armor, guns, ships, tanks, but they brought along their own armored forces as well, their own macroclades of Skitarii, and of course, their legions of Titans. Many designs were fielded then, for they could still be made in large numbers before the heresy. It would still always have been a phenomenal drain on the resources of any Forge world that boosted its output. But back then, they had the option. They still could. And when the Crusade came across human civilizations, it was a simple event most of the time, for they would be brought into compliance. A wonderful euphemism so often bandied about, a horror unto itself. How sanitized it all was. Brought into compliance. Meaning threatened, bombed, smashed, raided, or simply invaded flat out by the expeditionary fleets. Some would just drop hundreds of Marines into cities until the populace of that planet sued for peace. Some bombarded. Some negotiated at first. But many a world was brought to know the magnitude of the march of history, when the Collegia would drop down just one or a handful of Titans. They would march to a city or army, and hopefully they would surrender immediately. If not, they died. Fast, but nastily. Now the rub, as I have mentioned, was when the fleets met Forge Worlds created by the Mechanicum. Many yielded their sovereignty with pleasure, happy to be returned to the greater human fold and to be in direct contact with Mars once again. But many had been set up millennia in the past, had history and pride and culture all of their own, and all around them were barbarians. Feral worlds, or pre-industrial at the best, these islands of power and technology, these forge worlds, they thought they were invincible. So when the expeditionary fleets arrived, if they did not cede immediately, it would be the forces of Mars or other conquered forge worlds that would be instrumental in bringing them under control, and it was not forgotten nor forgiven. So when the Mechanicum tore itself in two, when the Fabricator General threw in with Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the lines were drawn. And so often those lines were reactionary. So, for example, if one forge world declared for Horus, their enemies would declare for the Emperor. This was not always the case, of course. Often the decision was made as it should have been, logically. But it was strange that the Mechanicum, who professed to be above petty concerns of the flesh, were beings of logic and technology, pious worshippers of the Omnissiah. So many decisions were made in the good old-fashioned human way, out of spite and hate. The legions of Titans once marched in their hundreds, their power enough to quell all resistance, for it is said that the Space Marines conquered the galaxy, but it would have taken them centuries or even millennia longer if they did not have the support of the Collegia Titanica. Millennia. Now, what is a Princeps, and how does it command a Titan? A Princeps is a pilot, but it is very complicated, because they do not steer with rudders or controllers, and they effectively mind meld with the Titan. An odd way to put it, you might think, for they surely must be two minds for there to be a meld, and the Titan, no matter its size or complexity, is effectively just a robot, right? But this is not the case. Although a Titan cannot act of its own free will without the conduit of a pilot, nor does it have what you would call a classic consciousness, it is in a very real way alive. It has urges, a temperament, a character, like a guard dog or a loyal warhorse, as some might see it. But the depth of the feelings are difficult to reflect, for they have what is called a machine spirit. Now many would know that abominable intelligence, or artificial intelligence as you and I would say it, is deeply illegal in the Mechanicum, or Mechanicus later. Deeply. The spectre of the cybernetic rebellions still loomed large in the subconscious of humanity, even thousands of years later, so full AI was not allowed. But you would not be incorrect to think that perhaps this is semantics in play. For a machine spirit, some say, is like a set of programs that form patterns of activity. Yet that definition is utterly destroyed by the very existence of the Titans and the need to master them. For they have memories, they have urges to attack and fight. The battle between Princeps and Titan is like a cowboy and a bucking bronco. Only if the Princeps loses, they could have their very mind melted, their personality utterly shorn and smashed by the sensory input, and when they duel again, each time the Princeps goes to walk the Titans again, it is harder for the pilot to let go. For they do not just merge with it on a hypothetical level, they become one. The pilot can feel the armor, can feel the Titan fire, its arms and its legs. Weapons and shields are extensions of themselves. When hit, the armor can scream in pain. Now when a Princeps dies in his throne, his cockpit, he can be left as a shadow inside the machine spirit, ready to whisper in the ears of the next rider. They are things that can be new, as a Mechanicus can still build them, but often they are millennia old, if not the very ones that helped conquer the galaxy. These ones are sometimes so potent, so angry, that no Princeps can be found who can rule their truculent bellicose id. The method of connection is a mind impulse unit. It can be attached via spinal plugs, akin to those for Astartes to connect to the black carapace. But some Princeps refuse to leave their Titans. They could be permanently enthroned in it, their spines grafted into its servos. Or they can even be held in amniotic fluid chambers, so they are only the Titan. But the increasing concentration and reaction time thereafter can come at a cost of the speedier insanity of the Princeps. For it can be difficult to remain attached to those things that matter to human beings when all of your existence is as a colossus of metal and power. A Princeps duels the Titan's machine spirit, then takes command. But there is so much data, so many more senses to compromise, that one person is not always enough for most Titans. The Moderati, juniors to the Princeps, will semi-merge with the Titan and take on sub-functions and actions to take the strain from the Princeps so they can concentrate on warfare, on battle. But these Moderati do not take on the beast that is the Titan, its machine spirit. It is for this reason that the Princeps is so very rare. Only truly 1 in a billion can become Princeps. They must be fleet of mind, sponges for information, and above all else, they must have wills of adamant. Few indeed. And it is often strange to others. The Mechanicum will leave untold Skitarii unattended and dying, just to fix one machine of worth. Yet in this instance only, even the Mechanicum will know that the worth of the pilot outweighs the worth of the Titan, and will go to extreme lengths to regain one, if at all possible. That rare. But why are they so rare? For once a legion of Titans could number in the hundreds. In the 41st millennium, they can be counted on 2 hands in the most extreme battles, non-existent in lesser affairs. Entire forge worlds may be able to maintain a few score, and they would be scattered across the galaxy, fighting in full deployments rarely above a dozen for the entire expedition. What caused this rarity? In 2 words, Titandeath. The stars burn brightly. I am here in the line. We have fought so often now. It has been weeks more. But then, those weeks have merged into the years before. It all feels like one battle now. One relentless struggle, one endless tumult. Yet, this is the day it ended. Beta Garmon, Rogel Dawn, titular war master for we Loyalists, had us here to bleed them. We all knew it. To delay them. When the Angel and the Barbarian arrived, some of the Moderati chanted on about hope, about bravery, about sacrifices worthy and remembered in honor. I did not sneer, but I did not indulge. Horus has the greater force. Every single report I received stated this as boldly as the sun that I greeted every morning. We fought hard, but I remembered that which so many had forgotten. It had been years now that we had been at war with him. He had become both a bogeyman and a distant threat at the same time. But he had taken on the characteristics of an enemy. So he was hated, of course, but he was also underrated by so many of the youth who had been sent to Beta Garmon. They were terrified, certainly, but also not, for he was a threat, not a reality. But to those of us who had fought in the Crusade in its last years, with them, with the Primarchs, with the War Master, we knew who he was. We knew what he was. A conqueror. And he had the greater force. There would always be some who would lambast that the Angel was the greater. But Beta Garmon had proven that wrong, just as it had with Dawn before. Horus was senior, not just in rank, but in caliber, and his Titans outnumbered us, but only barely. For years we had fought in the system. Then the clouds of the war parted, and the real battle began. It was hell. We could hear the wailing from the men sometimes. Each morning, I had to often compensate or ignore the shots, as men who had succumbed to cowardice were dealt with by their discipline officers. It scrambled their senses just to witness our confrontations, you see. In the last phase, we had struck back, had attacked Beta Garmon 2 and 3, retaken them. But it was not to last. It had been a ruse, some said later. I cannot bring myself to believe that. Not really. Nobody, not even a madman, would destroy so much out of hand. For hundreds of Titans died on Beta Garmon. Thousands. We stood in formations miles long as we engaged the defenders of Narcon City again and again. The air would be alive and perpetually burning and sizzling, due to the plasma and other shots that filled it so plentifully. On some days, the opening salvos were thick as rain. Plasma rain, missiles and worse. All crashing onto our void shields, lighting up the canyons we fought in around that damned city. Our shields mostly held, but some would crumple and the Titans would melt under the fire. They would melt. And this was before we even made visual contact. Then things would just get nastier, much faster. This went on for weeks. Entire areas of the region cluttered with so many dead, so many hulks gone, so many millions of men left there, that they were practically non-navigable. Yet still, we marched forward to that damned city, to Narcon. Yet that was not the worst of it. For if it had ended in honorable combat, no matter the outcome, it would have been a battle of legend. Yet even now, even when the flower of the Titans had been exterminated by each other, all in the name of the Emperor or the War Master, it was then that his betrayal and sheer nerve came over. For Horus detonated the star fortress that orbited the planet. It was called Anvil, and its debris came down on us as hard as one. So many of the Titans that still existed were struck by this endless rain of burning debris. Many said Horus lured us here, that he did this to destroy us, the Loyalist Titans. I think otherwise. I think he believed his Titans better, his men the best, as they ever did. And when it was proven that they were not, that we fought as hard as well, he reacted like a child, and instead of conceding defeat and potentially even stranding us here, he threw a starbase at us. But it struck down his own as well. So petulant, yet so effective. Those of us left were transported away, to Sol and Terra mainly. Horus had won, and now had a clear path to the Sol system, a clear path to Holy Terra and his father, the Emperor. We had some 1.5 or more legions when we fought at Beta Garmon, lighthouses in abundance. We left so much behind on that world, so many dead. Thousands of Titans gone. Thousands. I started with a point, which was that others, they never get the point. The point was not the destruction of the Titans alone. It was not just the smashing of the cream of the war engines of Mars. It was the loss of Princeps, of Moderati. It was the loss of experience, skill, instinct, knowledge. In that battle, in those days, the very flower of humanity was destroyed. for we were the best. The Princeps who waged the war, who were in the crusade, and we slew each other. And then Horus finished the job. And with this loss, the greatest lights of humanity winked out, never to return. The Horus Heresy saw the later destruction of more Titans, as Legio Mortis was instrumental at the Siege of Terra, as were their opposite numbers in the Imperium. But the damage had not finished being done. For when the traitors, both Astartes and Mechanicum, fled from Terra, they did not just all disappear. They had to be hounded into the Eye of Terror. And few bear to think of the decades of cat-and-mouse hardened war against all of the planets that had thrown in for Horus, but had not one jot of damage. These places had years to fortify themselves, taking in one group of retreating traitor Titan legions or vile marines after another. Each time, they had to be broken down, reduced, and then assaulted. The carnage of the scouring was horrific. Every bit as bad as the Horus Heresy in full swing. Every inch as bitter. So the Titans had to assist their marine allies, and they lost even more machine guards of war. The Titans were shattered. Worse, when they came back from war, they would have to be broken down further, to act as the central points of all new legios created by Forge Worlds. These veterans as the core in many cases, while the catchment protection fiefdom of these Forge Worlds would be extended, making them stretched thin. The Mechanicum became the Adeptus Mechanicus, but war never really stopped from that point onwards. The Xenos rose again and again, ever attacking where the Imperium felt itself safe. Odd terrors arose, the Beast, Gazgul, Magor, Xthaka, etc. The never-ending crusades of reclamation or aggression, of dominance. The chaos incursions that required every sinew of the Imperial military to counter. All have eroded the numbers of the Titans. There are some nuances to the ability to create them as well. The discourse revolves around the STC, or Standard Template Construct, versus rumours of natural retained ability to produce such wonders. In a monolithic Mechanicus that seems demented, it forgets so much. Yet I have points I think should help in understanding how this madness of simply forgetting technology may not only be understood, but also almost be impossible not to see when it is there in front of you. It's not about organizations, you see. It is, as always, about the fallibility of people. But that rabbit hole we shall go down fully when we address the Adeptus Mechanicus. Not too far off now. Sorry, it's a tough one. And we shall return to cover specific makes, models, weapons and variants, ranks, orders and history of all of the god machines of the Collegia Titanica in the future. I hope you are looking forward to it as much as I. Horus Heresy Legions are the sponsors of this video for a very specific reason. They have added Titans to their game. So, go check the links in the description. It is now time to not only play through the Horus Heresy as a general yourself, but also to command your very own god engines of war. The Titans of the Horus Heresy era. Go, hit the links and get stuck in. I have been Baltimore, your faithful servant. Mrs. B was wonderful as always. Subscribe or link buttons, blah blah blah, link thingy blah, tip thingy blah blah, and that's a wrap. Get a banana sandwich, yummy. Credits rolling. Thank angelically patient patrons. Thank Horus Heresy Legion, stompy stompy time, oh yes, thank you. Right, we're almost out. Say goodbye to confused listeners, here goes. And thank you for listening. And no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.